And good evening again. Welcome. The school committee is reconvening at 8:01 p.m. All members are present. So our first item on the agenda, we need to approve the August 3rd meeting minutes. Does anyone have any questions, recommendations, changes, etc.? Okay, is there a motion to approve the August 3rd meeting minutes as provided in your packet?
Moved by Dawn.
Seconded by Cynthia.
By Dawn, seconded by Cynthia. Roll call vote. Ms. Koshin?
Yes.
Ms. Naborski?
Yes.
Dr. Savard?
Yes.
Mrs. Listevnik?
Yes.
Ms. Hanstead?
Yes, sorry.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Mrs. Raffi, yes. Okay, this evening for communications, we don't have anyone registered for public comment. I am going to jump right in. I'm actually going to switch it up tonight and start with central office. Mr. Boudet, do you have any public comment tonight? Dr. Patello?
I'll save it for later.
And Dr. Kuska?
I think most of mine relates to COVID updates, so I'll stick with that when we get there.
No, remember you were going to talk about something now first?
Oh, well, I kind of was lumping that all into COVID, but I can do a bunch of things.
Don't lump it.
Okay. One of the first things, I know that this was something that people asked about recently, was the calendar. That came up in a couple of meetings, that we've had some changes related to the calendar, and students that were in cohort A or B, sometimes the days have gotten adjusted a little bit. So I had talked to the principals the other day about, at the mid-year point, would they look at the calendar and see if we need to adjust the date so that we balance it out, because there could be some changes still to come. We don't know what's going to happen with the holidays, if we ever have to go into any remote days temporarily. So that way we decided that the mid-year would be a good time to see where we are. And if we need to do any catch-up days, we can adjust that for the second half of the year if cohort B or A needs to be adjusted. So that's one thing I know people were asking about. The other
Before
thing
before you jump in though, can that cohort calendar be reposted? People found that helpful. It was color coded. It was red and green, I think.
Yeah.
It was posted somewhere, and then
it disappeared.
I don't know where it went, but could we repost that?
I believe it's still there. I looked the other day. If you go on the calendar, if you click the calendar, district calendar, there are 3 different links underneath it, and one of them is the cohort by A and B, and the other one is the color coded. Yes, Peter, you just checked, so it is still there.
Yep.
So just look under district calendar, and there are 3 different options there. So then when we adjust it, obviously I'll bring that to you at school committee, because I want you to see that. We could talk about it, and then we can post it at that time.
It's on here.
Okay, well, that as long as we clarify that, and just say that again, Susan, so it's on the district calendar under.
If you click the link for the district calendar, under the regular calendar, there are 2 others. One's the cohort AB. It's listed by AB, and then there's the third one, which is the green and red. That I think Keith was. I think that was your color coding.
Yeah. Is it possible just to add it to the fall reopening side, just so that, because all of our reopening plans seem to be located on one side, and then people are looking for that on another side? I don't know if that would be helpful at all.
Yeah, I'll talk to Dan and see if he can find a place for it in there as well.
Awesome. Right, thank you. I'm sorry for the interruption. That was helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and the other thing I do want to mention, because this is a really positive thing, we were very worried, and I had talked with Matt Baker, our director of athletics, a number of times before we were getting ready to start sports, and hoped that we were going to be able to start sports. It's come with challenges. As you know, we've had to limit spectators, but we were able to work with Chief Cassidy, our emergency management director, to see if we could have some spectators, and students have been able to, an athlete has been able to bring 2 family members to the home games. And that has been the limitation. And it certainly is challenging that we want our students to come to the games. We want to have the community there, but it is a COVID and it is pandemic. So we've had to have that limit. I'm excited though, that we've had a very positive season and the kids have been able to get to their games in most cases. We are still anxious about what's going to happen next for the winter athletes and or the fall too, whether we're going to be able to have those opportunities again. If the town stays yellow, which we are right now, that's a good sign. But if we start to go into the red again, it really is up to the Board of Health. And we'd be working with our emergency management director And then the school committee might have to vote on whether or not we could have sports, particularly if it go into the red. I am worried, and I met with our director of athletics today. He's done an awesome job, and he's really worked so hard to get our students back to sports this fall. But there is a worry about the indoor sports, as you can imagine, because we have limitations as to where we can bring our students. One of the areas is whether or not the pool would be open at Keefe Tech, which is right now in the red and not open for in-person. So these things all have to be ironed out, but we do have a couple of weeks because that next season would not start until after the winter break. But I do want to say thank you to Mr. Baker and the awesome job he and the coaches have done. They were just so excited that they could have our student athletes come, even though there were limitations, and we all have to sacrifice to do what's best to get our athletes back. So I'm hopeful that we will be able to have our next season to some capacity.
Was that all?
That was it for now. Everything else, I think we'll wait till we go to the next section if it.
All right, thank you. All right, school committee, does anyone have any comment? Cynthia?
I do. The cat. We had a PTO meeting this week. There was, I think, 6 of us there, and Jess Beatty and David Jordan also joined. And that was our first meeting of the year. And although there's not a lot of activities that they're going to be able to do, like 6th grade dance lessons aren't going to happen, and dances, et cetera, like that. They did vote to replenish the K-cups and individual snacks for the teachers in their planning room for them, which I guess they were appreciative of, and just to give a little boost for our teachers. So that's just a little update from the PTO. But also there's a couple of just RAMS updates. One was that it's getting to be the end of the term, so they are encouraging parents to please check PowerSchool for your children's missing assignments. I won't tell you how many are missing from my children, but there are several. And but also thoughts about if there's parents who are maybe interested in helping with some of the Zoom classes, where they could come in and just be like that second adult in a class on a weekly basis, the way for an hour or something, just like we used to do like laps for lunch when we were in person, or when your kids were younger, you remember doing library duty on like a weekly or every other week basis, just to kind of help being that second adult in that room to help with manage the students in breakout rooms or things like that. So just be on the lookout for that. I think David Jordan's going to be sending something out about that. And the last thing that I just want to ask for parents to do is just if you can think of something that your teacher has done for your student, very specifically something that they have done for them, if you could just send them a quick email just to let them know that you appreciate them. And I think that's it. Oh, wait, I have one more thing. And then also the pickup at 12:30 at Rams has been a little bit congested. So the suggestion was that if you could have your child walk down a little bit farther down on Woodland Street, like I pick up my kids at 12:30 on Elm Street, on that street, so that it's just away from the Woodland campus. So anybody that could kind of work on doing that would be appreciated, and get the kids to get a little bit of exercise and walk away from the building. Thanks.
So just to clarify, that was the middle school PTO that met the other day.
Yes.
Townwide PTO is on the 16th, I believe, at 7 p.m. Just to clarify, and the vote was for the middle school teachers' lounges to be replenished. I don't want other school teachers to be like, whoa, wait, where's our K-cups? There was a different thing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dawn, you had your hand raised?
I did. I just wanted to do a quick shout out for high school drama. There is a cabaret show they're putting together that should be available online shortly. And the students are working or did write a play, and that performance they're anticipating will be posted in December. As to the fall sports, it was really, I can't say it enough how appreciative the athletes, their families, the students have been about having that opportunity to play. And just a quick shout out, boys cross country had a great season. They went 3-2-0. Girls soccer undefeated. They 7 wins, 3 ties. Boys soccer 5-3-2, all outstanding seasons. The girls cross country went undefeated. won all of their meets. They have some outstanding young runners leading the pack. And field hockey has their final game this upcoming weekend, and they are undefeated at this point, 7-0. So thank you very much for everyone, to our athletic director, to our coaches, to our teachers and students that all supported this. Thank you.
That's awesome news, all of it. A little bright spot.
Anybody else? So I'm going to shift gears a little bit to be a little bit more serious. I received a call on Monday with someone sharing with me that there was an incident over the weekend at the high school. It was behavior of students and potentially adults, where there was some disrespectful comments and attitudes and just some general behavior that is not something that we here at HPS promote or condone. I would like to publicly apologize to Mr. Matt Baker, our athletic director, to Fire Chief Mike Cassidy, who's our emergency management director, to Mr. Priest, who's our campus supervisor, and I believe it was to Ms. Smith, who is one of our wellness directors. The disrespect towards those adults is unacceptable, and I'm embarrassed that it happened, and I'm embarrassed that we got called out on it. So I apologize to all of them. Everybody has been working so hard to give our kids something this year. Last spring, there were no sports. There weren't extracurricular activities. So they did a phenomenal job and had a season without incident. There may have been challenges. There may have been changes to protocols. We should be proud of that. But I'm not proud of the report that I received on Monday. So I apologize to them. We're better than that. I don't expect for that ever to happen again. Those are people who have made sure that our students have had the best possible experience in this global pandemic. Some of the protocols, quite frankly, are crappy. And I'm sorry that not everyone can be a spectator at a game. But we're doing this all so that we can stay open for as long as we can, so that we can mitigate risk and so that we can stay through this, so that we can get through this pandemic. So please keep your masks on. If people ask you to stop congregating and to spread out, spread out. Wash your hands. And above all, be respectful and kind. This is our community.
Can I thank you for bringing that up, Stacy? And I do want to say that I think there's been a misconception that those are HPS rules and regulations. They're actually coming from MIAA, as well as the Tri-Valley sports directors, all working collectively to come up with the same, because this is not just a Holliston thing. This is a more widespread, because we have to have the regulations in place in order to have the sports take place at all. And I do appreciate how hard all of our coaches and Mr. Baker worked, because it certainly is a united effort to get this to happen at all. And it's been very trying, for sure. There was one other thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I think I lost it. It'll probably come back to me, but there was one other thing I wanted to mention with that. But you brought up the wearing of masks, and certainly with the governor changing the protocols at the state level as well, we just want to remind all of our students that it's not just on campus or in school, it's also walking from campus. We have to have masks on in public at all times, and that is a big change. And it's not that it shouldn't have happened already. It's just the governor is really solidifying that, because he did talk about fines that could happen. That, again, is not a Holliston thing. That is now a statewide thing.
Other committee members? Catherine?
Yeah, so I just want to comment on the, we all know that the protocols recently have increased and intensified. And to echo what you were just saying, that those are statewide. They're not things that we are drumming up in Holliston Public Schools to make life more difficult, or, there's safety issues. And people have been hearing it since March 13th or whatever it was, that we're all in this together. But I think as the number of cases in the state increase, it becomes even more true that we all need to abide by these protocols in order to keep the vulnerable safe. And I think sometimes when you are not a vulnerable person, it becomes very easy to forget that other people are living in fear of this. And so you may not be one of the people who is high risk. You may have had it and have had no symptoms whatsoever. And I think they say 40 to 50% of people have no symptoms whatsoever. But that doesn't mean that this isn't still a very, very scary situation for a lot of people. And I guess my ask, and I know the sign on Washington Street says small ask, wear a mask. But my ask is to not try to find loopholes, to uphold the protocols as leaders in the community to keep everyone safe, and don't make somebody else's minimum your maximum. We have to do this. We have to do this together. And if you're not a vulnerable person, well, good on you. I'm happy for you. But there's a lot of people who are. And when you turn your back on the protocols, you're turning your back on the most vulnerable people. And I'm asking you not to.
Anybody else? All right. So Susan, Andy, sorry.
Real quick, I think it's probably worth reminding our student body that when they're at a athletic contest or event, effectively they're at school, and all of our school rules apply, and all of our school disciplinary policies apply. So hopefully in the future we don't have these kind of issues, but I could see that parents and students want to attend games, and it would be a shame if we had to end that. So I hope that they recognize the seriousness of that. Parents, shame on you. Students, certainly, I would hope they understand the seriousness of that, and they've been spoken to. But thank you for bringing this up.
With that, let's sort of switch gears a little bit. I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, so let's move on. Dr. Kuska, keep talking about COVID.
I know. Well, one thing I did want to mention before, because the one thing that I was thinking of is I know that tomorrow is Be Kind Day, and I know that Ann King sent something out to staff to wear T-shirts, and I did get one on Amazon myself, so I'll be wearing my Be Kind T-shirt tomorrow, and I hope our staff remember to wear that, and students, because I think that is an important message that these are very challenging times, and the more we can try to put ourselves into other people's shoes and step back and be kind in all circumstances, I think that's really an important message. So I just wanted that was the one thing I wanted to remember before I moved on. The other few items that I had under COVID updates, last week, as you all know, we went back to the yellow, but it wasn't because our numbers necessarily decreased, but at the state level, they changed the metrics. And Chief Cassidy has been working at the state level to try to be able to communicate this to us effectively, because they were changed for good reason, because we're a very small town, and then they were getting skewed, and that is why the numbers and the metrics changed. So that's good that we're in the yellow, and we're in the yellow again this week. Chief Cassidy is sending me some information tonight, and I will add that to my end of the week update tomorrow, and I'll add the link to the town website so that whatever he communicates there, I'll be trying to link that in every week. And I did already start to update our COVID dashboard with the numbers. So our overall numbers for the last 2-week look back have gone down. We had 5 cases in the last 2 weeks as opposed to 13 the prior 2 weeks. So that is a decrease, but that doesn't mean it's not still lurking in the surrounding, at any time the numbers could change. So I was happy to see that, but still concerned. The other few things I know that a lot of people are confused about, as rightfully so, the commissioner and the governor both talked about they want students back in school. If you look at, I sent out some information from Professor Allen out of Harvard. He did a webinar last Friday for superintendents, which was very useful. And I think, Keith, you watched that webinar with me as well. He was a very, very informed professor related to the School of Health. She had a lot of valuable information related to how COVID aerosolization spreads and how it might not. And, there still are concerns, but the social emotional well-being and the mental health of students not coming to school, they feel is also a very serious, could be a pandemic, as well as to the overall health of our students. So we are very strongly encouraged to stay in person as long as we are humanly possible, barring any changes at the state level. And so far, we've been able to do that very successfully with the additional changes in place. We've been able to mitigate as much as possible the impact of spread from student to student or staff to staff at the school level. So that's a great thing. But people are questioning when the commissioner is saying that we should be increasing our in-person. When it's feasible, that's true. And the commissioner is talking about not districts like ours. I had to complete a survey the other day because a lot of districts, as I've shared with school committee, many districts that are in hybrid are hybrid from pre-K to 12. And in their in-person learning, they're typically only in-person 2 out of 5 days a week. And then often 3 days a week, they're getting asynchronous learning. I'm happy to say that our rigorous model is allowing us and reminding people that K to 3, we have our students, if they're choosing to be in person 5 days a week, and then 4 to 12, our students are all able to access a teacher. They're in person on the hybrid 5 out of 10 days, but in the opposite 5 days, they're not getting all asynchronous learning. We're getting direct instruction from teachers all 10 days. So that's really rigorous. And it comes with a lot of hefty work from our teachers, from our administrators, from our paraprofessionals, and we value all the work that they're doing. But that does not mean that we can open up our doors and add more students back because we still have that 6-foot distancing in place. So when the commissioner was talking about when it's feasible getting more students back in person, he was really referring to the districts that are not doing in-person learning at all, such as if they're all remote or if they're doing the asynchronous days. He's trying to get the schools to come up with a better plan so that on the days that they're not in person, they're also getting a teacher. So he's very happy with the model that we're using. And, hopefully we'll hear more about that now that I have sent that survey data back. One other thing, the other item I wanted to make sure I mentioned tonight, and I will put this in my update tomorrow as well, flu vaccines. As you know, the state has required that all students to be in person, and they are recommending for remote students as well, but students are supposed to have their flu vaccine no later than December 31st, 2020. We did offer, thank you, Lynn Bowler and our nurses for getting 200 plus students, I believe, were able to get their flu vaccine right at our schools outside a few weeks back, and that was awesome. But we still have a number of students who have not been able to get their flu vaccine. And unfortunately, if they're in person and they do not get their flu vaccine, we would not be able to let them be on campus at that time. And the nurses are trying to get that data. So if you have had your children vaccinated with the flu vaccine, please send in that certificate so the nurses can determine how many more students need to get it and how we can encourage that to happen efficiently, because it's getting close to December at this point already. So thank you. I think that's it for me right now.
Thank you. So Keith, do you want to give us our CARES update?
Thank you, Stacy. Tomorrow I'm doing the first of our 2 submissions to the state with regards to making a request for basically reimbursement of our expenses. It's just making a claim against a grant, which is the way they're treating the CARES money. I ran this through the fire chief. My original number was at 402,000, and then after something Anne-Louise alluded to, after I ran it through the fire chief and certain funds or certain expenses go to FEMA money first, which covers 75% of some items, the number dropped down to 286,000, a reduction of 116,000. The change was at a webinar that I went to about this grant last week. The state determined that as part of our reporting piece, we were to apply the FEMA money first and take it away from the expenses that we were claiming, which is something that, truthfully, in town we had anticipated that was going to be a separate piece. So we would claim our money and that the FEMA reimbursement would basically go to the town for reallocation. Instead, it's coming to us directly, basically. So that's where, I'm not worried any longer about us overspending our FEMA money. In fact, if this continues, I may look for a few other areas that we had turned down that got actually taken from the appropriation because we hadn't planned on spending it there. We may be pulling additional costs from there, which is actually something that Desi recommended at that webinar as well, to make sure you go through every one of your bills. And actually one of the people actually asked a question about things like legal costs, which we absorbed additional legal costs during the negotiations for the MOU. So that's a perfect example of something that we hadn't anticipated, hadn't planned on, but we would be able to get reimbursed for that. So I'm going to have to obviously amend the grant to cover things like that, but that's other places where I'm going to be looking to spend out of. So, but overall, I said we're in really good shape. We're not fully employed yet or fully hired yet for all of the positions, but again, that's going to create additional room in certain areas as well. But it'll cover some places that we have spent additional, money over that as well. Things such like as storage containers, which I didn't expect us to have to need 8. I only planned on 4. So, but otherwise, I can take any questions if anybody has any, or I can mute.
Keith, are you going to talk about the memo too, or no?
That wasn't CARES.
Oh, sorry.
That's capital.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Does anyone have any questions about that at all? Okay, great. Oh, Anne Louise?
Not a question, and I'm sorry because I've got a couple of distractions here this evening. Keith, I don't know if you mentioned it, but given this room and funding, it may present the opportunity for us to support some of the needs that that we have that kind of emerged as a result of the pandemic, even though we thought we had sort of planned for everything. And one of those potentially would be getting a little more support in teaching staff for the middle school for French immersion. There may be some room for some funding for that because it directly ties to the remote learning model associated with language instruction at the middle school. I had asked him to look into that, and I know Susan had already been trying to address that, and I know you don't have the full plan unveiled yet, but I think it's important to understand that there may be some room now in the CARES funding for it, and a couple of other things as well, but that's an important one, so I wanted to mention it.
Any other questions? Comments? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Keith, and thank you, Chief, for I know this is another added piece of the puzzle for you to work through, so thank you. Budget Subcommittee and Keith, do you want to talk about the capital request?
Yes. So there's 2 items in the capital request in a memo that Keith sent to you, and I'll have him go through the details because just to add insult to injury, I'm having some technical difficulties and can't even pull it up. But one of them relates to the Chromebook purchase that we would ordinarily do in the spring. But we are asking the committee tonight to approve an expedited request for funds for that so that the Chromebook order can be put in sooner rather than later for next year. And basically, this is a replenishment for 400 some odd units. And every year, Catherine, this is not, this may be a little bit new for you, but the way our model works is that we try to replenish a certain number of units every year so that we don't just wait until a bunch of them break or we have, a big tranche of them that we have to do all at once. That helps us level our expenses against the technology because every year you're going to need a certain number of these, right? So we usually do a couple of grades at a time. Typically that request gets put in to the warrant for the May town meeting. This past year, with the pandemic, we found ourselves in a very uncomfortable position where we knew the lead times for ordering was going to go up significantly. It was about 4 months, and that almost put us in jeopardy of not having the units, the devices in time to be ready for opening of school. And that may well happen again. So one of the reasons we're putting it in now is so that we can get ahead of that curve for this year. And then I would expect the following year to go back to normal. The second thing is related to a solution for addressing the interior of the field house, which anybody who's been in there knows we are struggling with the paint coming off the walls. It's largely a cosmetic issue. It's been something that we've been trying to address for some time. No easy solution, by the way, and Keith can talk to it. But we have a grant that has been approved. Kudos to Keith, by the way, just for even putting that out there, the application for that grant. But it only covers a portion of the expense of the project. And so we need to ask the town for money to do the rest. And then we still have to pay for the installation, which is a labor cost. So that's what's in the memo. And we're asking you guys to approve that tonight so that it can get to the select board and in the warrant by Tuesday, to the finance committee and in the warrant by Tuesday.
And Louise, what percentage is covered by the grant and what is not covered by the grant? Like the labor is not covered by the grant? Do you know?
Keith, why don't you go through the details of it?
Thank you.
For the panels that Anne Louise is talking about, first I just want to give credit where credit is due. I brought in a number of vendors, or different vendors, not a number, but different vendors. I said the same thing as a number. I brought in a number of vendors over the last X years, 3 or 4 years now, to look at the Fieldhouse situation. That's when I had Sherwin-Williams come in and told me that it was a prep issue on the walls, that they were done improperly, gave me the 3 lousy options, not the word he used, 3 lousy options for doing it: sandblasting, chemically treating it, or covering it.
Yeah.
The first 2 solutions are both expensive and obviously would take the field house offline for quite a period of time.
To the tune of like $500,000, right?
And
Just
well,
to
because
refresh
again,
people's memories.
if you chose
Yeah.
one of those 2 options, you then still had to then go and properly prepare the walls and then repaint it as
Right.
well.
Exactly.
Projects were in the hundreds of thousands of
Right.
dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So and I had different vendors. What if you did this? One vendor came up with they're quilted insulative panels, and they both insulate for sound and heat. They have an R value of 13, which the current R value of a galvanized steel wall is probably 1.
Right. Saying 0.
So the
Negative.
the panels themselves will help with the heat. Now, granted, up that high on the wall, that's where the heat is anyway, based on the design of the heating system. The heating system puts out, the heating system is in the ceiling, basically 35, 37 feet in the air, has to blow the warm air down. The ventilation to take the heat to recirculate the air is in the ceiling also. So the heat comes down probably about 20, 25 feet and stays up there. So insulation may not help as much as we'd like it to. But that being said, so every year the town applies for a Green Communities grant. The town controls it. Chris Mayo is the host of it and does the application. So every year he asks me, so what ideas do you have for this year? So I said, well, I got these panels that, they'll put some insulation in there. I don't think anybody's going to fund it, but, what the heck? And so there was $50,000 of available funding in what Holliston could apply for. So we put that in there, or Chris put that in there. Turns out they funded it. So the problem is that I need between $80,000 and $90,000 worth of panels alone that the $50,000 covers, and the labor's between $40,000 and $50,000 to do it. Okay. Now, when Brad and I were talking, previous superintendent, you all remember him? Yeah. When Brad and I were talking about the panel idea, he was like, well, maybe we could, end of year stuff, maybe, or bundle it with this, maybe a little bit of town money, et cetera, and have maintenance do the work, in the summer or, during school break periods or whatever. And we didn't have to do it all at once. You do one of the 4 walls, so it's no big rush. The problem now, so there'll be an opportunity to save that 40 or 50,000. The problem is that these projects for the Green Communities Act, these projects have to be completed by January 15 in order for the town to request money next year. So if we took the money and didn't complete the project by January 15th, it harms the town from other projects for the year. So we don't really want to do that. Right. So the question is, is this a project we want to undertake? If it is, I think we I think we have to kind of commit to the higher number of another 40,000 in panels and another 40,000 in labor. And again, may we be able to pull it off? Sure. but I can't guarantee it's going to happen by June 15th unless we decide to go all remote and I have nothing for my maintenance guys to do. You know what I mean?
You mean January 15th, right?
January 15th, sorry. Did I say June again?
Yeah.
I said June during the Capitol meeting just before this meeting as well.
I was like, 6 months is no problem. Okay. So it really only gives from the time that it gets approved, if it gets approved by the town, it gives like 6 weeks.
It's well, the first piece of it is if it gets approved, if we put it forward here, I've reached out to a couple of vendors who carry these panels, and one of them didn't have any inventory, or not the inventory we would need. I mean, we need, I think it was 216 panels, if I remember correctly.
Oh boy, that's a lot of panels.
And so they didn't have the inventory to even come close to that number. So another vendor says they do have the inventory, but it comes and goes. So that's the other piece of all of this. If I can't get the panels, it doesn't matter if I can get the labor, because I can't get the panels, and it's still, the date is still January 15th, whether it's, you know,
So ultimately, would it be our risk then? Like, let's just say, what if we didn't get it in on time, but we did get the panels? So then it's just really the labor is the risk then, right?
Well, we may have to ask for parent volunteers to come, and everybody puts up a panel. So,
So we have a couple of options. One thing that came up when we were talking about this, because it's capital, was a suggestion was maybe we could use Keep Tech students for this, and Keith's going to look into it. I mean, he pointed out typically you need 6 months lead time to get their support, but nothing's typical right now, so maybe they're available.
Are they remote though? I thought they were remote, so I don't know.
Well, they may be remote for school, but they may still be able to assist with a project like this, because it's not like, you know, whatever. So that's one thing. The second thing is that we can approve this tonight, and should we have a change of heart, we can certainly do that before town meeting, or even at town meeting, because we typically schedule you know, a school committee meeting at the beginning of town meeting in case we have last minute changes. So, you know, we have some room to work around this. The other thing, which we haven't discussed at length, but we talked about it briefly, Keith, a little while ago, not today, but something just occurred to me, because there may be an inventory issue, which I'd like to say is attached to the pandemic, because there's so many building material supply issues. The supply chain model is broken. Maybe that would be a relevant reason to apply for a waiver on the timing, because really all we need is like February break to be able to use our staff potentially to do it then, or over the holidays. I don't know. I know it's a question mark, but we could inquire about it. So the labor piece is really the big sticking point. But I guess my recommendation to the committee, and I'll apologize because we haven't really had an opportunity to discuss this in subcommittee, but would be to go ahead and vote in favor of this tonight, because we still have a few weekends, or weeks rather, to step back on it if we feel that we need to.
I think it's a great idea. I mean, anything that we can do to mitigate the
that or a flag.
I know the flag. I like the flag idea. I'm not against the flag idea either, but there's no R factor, you know. So
no R factor on
no R factor on a flag. So,
but they are cheap. They
are cheap. True. Yes.
And Keith, is there any language what if town meeting doesn't happen or doesn't happen within the time frame? Is that another opportunity for a waiver?
Oh, that's a good point too.
I would say that Chris Mayo doesn't believe that there's any opportunities for waivers. I'll be honest with you. We've never heard that as an option ever. We've had work done on weekends with these projects at night. One of the projects got done on third shift. In one of the
never say never, Keith.
I know.
I really
know.
Well, I'm only reflecting past, what we know about the past. That's all.
I know.
But
it's long gone.
Is there any? Is there a cost benefit to doing this? Meaning,
the return on investment is like well, it depends on how much we would ask for the town from the town, I should say. The ROI is in the decades. So it's not a pretty number.
But that's not, honestly, so many projects you look at return on investment for a project that's going to pay back either in terms of resources or benefit. That isn't the evaluation on this. The evaluation on this is its cost exposure relative to other means of addressing this problem. So
I'm not saying this.
No, I know, but I want to address this for the community. I think it's a really important point. So we've got a problem. The walls in the field house look like, the paint's just coming down, and it's not attractive, so it's largely cosmetic. But we can just let that go, or attempt to address it. And as Keith pointed out, for 3 years or so, we've been trying to find a solution that was cost effective and sort of worthy of investing in, if you will. So this is really about cost mitigation as opposed to like trying to look for a return on investment, like when we replaced all the light bulbs, for instance.
Or the window or something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And the reason I say that is because unlike every other aspect of that high school building, if we were to go into a renovation or a potentially a rebuild, the one piece that stays as is that field house. That is it. That is our field house for life. And a lot of high schools don't even have a field house. I know, it's true. So yeah. I think whatever we can do to maintain it, both functionally as well as in its appearance, is something that we have to do. So, and we can choose not to do this to take advantage of the grant. We can choose not to do that, but it's as good a solution, if not better, than anything else that's been put forward, except for the flags.
Yeah, and again, warmth. It'll be a little warmer, right?
And I think that if you look at it from the standpoint of, this project is going to cost somewhere between 90 and say 140,000. We have a grant that's going to cover somewhere between just over half and just over a third that's available to us, and that makes it a lot more palatable. So
yeah.
Are there any questions about the Fieldhouse grant? Okay, so the first, we'll do this in 2 motions, 2 votes. Is there a motion to approve a capital request for the replenishment of the 6th and 9th grade Chromebooks for a total of $112,065.60?
Moved by Cynthia.
Seconded by Louise.
Moved by Cynthia, seconded by Anne Louise. All in favor, roll call vote. Ms. Koshin?
Yes.
Dr. Savard?
Yes.
Mrs. Listevnik?
Yes.
Ms. Hanstead?
Yes.
Ms. Naborski?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Mrs. Raffi? Yes. Is there a motion to approve the request of $90,000 to supplement / finish the field house wall? What is the name of this grant? So I can put
it's a Green Communities grant.
To supplement the Green Communities grant in a total of $90,000.
So moved by Anne Louise.
Second.
By Anne Louise, seconded by Cynthia. All in favor, roll call vote. Ms. Koshin?
Sorry, yes.
Dr. Savard?
Yes.
Mrs. Listevnik?
Yes.
Ms. Hanstead?
Yes.
Ms. Naborski?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Mrs. Raffi? Yes. Great. Thank you. So on Monday evening, the budget subcommittee will go to the select board with those 2 requests. Thank you. And thank you, Chris Mayo, for working on this grant with us. And Keith, of course, you too, but you did give credit to Chris as well. All right. Susan, Dr. Kuska, district goals.
Yes, I'll share my screen, but I shared out the other day our updated district goals related to the 5-year plan and the 3-year roadmap. Dr. Patello was good enough to add a column for us because we had a tentative plan and some updates for 2021 in the roadmap, but because of COVID, we felt that we needed to make some adjustments. So it is quite long, and there's a column in yellow now, which is the 2020-21 revise that we want you to focus on. And we tried to make sure that we were making sure that we're moving items forward that are still critical to the improvement of HPS. However, we wanted to also be aware that there are lots of things that have happened this year that make it difficult to do all of the things that we had on that roadmap. So we took out some items that don't seem as much of a priority right now. And I don't think you want me to go through the whole thing because it is quite lengthy, but I felt like since you had an advance, you might have some specific questions that you wanted to ask that either myself or Dr. Patello could address tonight.
Susan, will you just show so the community can just see each area, and then if you want to say 30-second elevator pitch, if you will, for each one, and then you can stop sharing your screen and the committee can ask questions. But just if you could just share with everyone what's been added.
Sure. On the prior area 1, innovative learning opportunities, we needed to take into account that we were in the hybrid and remote model now, and that is actually changing how our platform is looking, the good and the bad of COVID. Although we have had some problems that we had to address in trying to make sure our students are getting a rigorous learning platform, the one thing I will say is this has been a huge paradigm shift for us. We've known for years that education has had to change and technology has been there, but integrating technology has been very challenging. And for better or for worse, COVID has forced us to use technology in a different way. We now have cameras in each class, and we have teachers that are now dealing with their remote students and their hybrid students via Zoom. They're taping things, they're sharing things. So even though it's been quite a challenge, and I do credit how hard our teachers, administrators, and all of our staff are working, it has forced a shift in how we use technology and how it's actually creating a rigorous platform for the use of that. So that is what you'll see embedded here in many of our areas about how we're using technology in a different way. And it's also led to the increase in us asking for more technology to have a one-on-one initiative for our students. And then continuing on, implementing year 2 of the district-wide strategic plan of digital learning technology. Again, you've seen Dan McLeod, our Director of Technology and Digital Learning, has been sharing a lot of information, and he just recently did his technology updates for you. So I know that you've had a lot of input about how we're using technology and embedding it throughout our plans. We go further down. Social emotional is still a huge need and an increased need. We know that our students and our staff have suffered a lot of trauma and are continuing to do so. This pandemic has really maximized the need of all people to support one another. So we are continuing to embed this in the work that we do. And we're also looking into how we can support student learning. I mean, the goal would be that hopefully with the vaccine, we'll get back into a normal platform for next year. But even with that, we're going to continue to need to support our staff and students with the social emotional piece in all of the work that we do, because it's been a huge setback for people being stuck at home, dealing with this pandemic and the anxiety and fear that we all bring into it. I do think that embedding it, you saw that we did a family survey, and tomorrow I'll be sharing our staff survey results, talking about how we're using SAL. That is one area that we know that a lot of our students aren't able to access in the same manner because of the remote learning that they're doing, whether in hybrid or full remote. So we are going to be working with, each school is going to be working with their guidance counselor to see if there are better ways that we can embed social emotional learning in not only the in-person model, but our hybrid and remote models as well.
Susan, can I ask you a quick question about that? It's about the mood check program. Is there any adjustments that we've made to the implementation of the mood check program, doing it additionally or throughout other grades? Is there an ability for us to do that at all?
I'm only aware that it's going to be the same grades as it has been before. But one thing I will say is I met with David Jordan the other day, and because they've had that in place for a few years, they're able to do a lot of comparison data. Yeah. And at some point, I'm going to maybe have him share some data that he's been collecting to show you the difference in our students
Yeah.
and their mood based on whether they're remote or in person. The data is fascinating, and we'll be able to share that out once we have a little bit more information on that.
Okay, thank you.
Because it really is, you'll see quite a difference in the students as far as the in-person versus the remote, as to how that affects their tendencies for their well-being overall.
Yeah, thank you.
And then continuing on in the social emotional learning, making sure we're trying to find some ways to connect with students. I think that is our biggest challenge right now. It is certainly hard. I know for me coming in and not having personal connections with staff or students, and then facing people through a remote learning platform, I know how challenging it is. And now we've got some of our students that are full remote, and could be by choice, but even as low as kindergarten, to be able to make those personal connections is quite a challenge. And we really do need to come up with some other strategies for that. Under teaching all students, again, being mindful of how this is impacting the development of students and teachers in the remote and hybrid platform. Also, we still want to make sure that we're connecting our co-teaching models and supporting our students, because even the way we're accessing our special needs students, that has changed as well. But we are doing our best to make sure we're meeting, obviously, the IEP needs of students. And we've had a multi-year process, which I'll actually let Peter jump into and talk a little bit about how each school is still continuing that multi-year process of trying to embed the co-teaching model at different levels. And Peter, you obviously have a better background on that, so why don't you jump in a little bit and talk about that piece, because you talked to Kelly
Yeah,
quite a bit
we
about
started this. We started this initiative a few years back with the started with Placentino and then Miller, and now we've began a little bit last year with the middle school. And this is about like formal co-teaching, when you really have a special educator and a general educator working side by side, planning lessons together, implementing and bringing their different expertise to the table in order to benefit kids with special needs. So we're going to be continuing some of that work. They'll probably look a little bit different than what we would do typically. But then we also want to take advantage of some of the learning around how true co-teachers collaborate with one another, and also apply those understandings to just some of these many different partnerships we have this year of teachers working together with other adults, and making sure that we're maximizing that as well.
Yeah, so definitely it looks different this year, but not trying to give up on that work and still continue it forward. And also embedding professional development for paraprofessionals, a big piece. Kelly and her department, Kelly Camp and her department have really worked hard. They were doing a lot of training with the Accept Collaborative, and now we've had a lot of our own staff trained, so they're going to be able to offer a lot of the models and training for our paraprofessionals in-house, which is great. A lot of it is going to be taped, and our staff are able to do it on their own time. They do get paid for that, by making sure that we're getting some more professional development that's really specific to the needs of all of our paraprofessionals, but in particular the ones that are working with our special needs students as well. And moving on. Next section on communication. Big piece of what we were trying to do this year is start a new website. As you all have seen, there are some needs to update that. We all know that, but we're trying to make it as meaningful as possible for this year right now. We were going to be doing that in the fall, but given all of the technology needs, as you know, we're still trying to roll out iPads and get some more technology into the hands of our younger students. So that had to be set back a little bit. The hope is that our department will be able to work on implementing and transitioning over to the new website as of January. So that is exciting and something to look forward to. We're also trying to use our Power School and Bright Arrow a lot more to communicate, and we're looking into some, Keith and I and Dan McLeod and a number of our other staff are looking at some different human resources platforms. We started looking as to how we could use Power School more robustly, but we've looked at another one today. So we're still going to look into how we can have more efficient use of technology to onboard our staff, and also to maintain their personnel folders, because as you probably are aware, we've had a lot more hiring, and the paper process has been very it's not time efficient. It hasn't been in the past, but now with the needs of hiring more staff, it's really showing us our limitations. So trying to move to a more electronic process for that as well. And then you've seen an increase this year, certainly because of COVID. People are probably sick of my communication at this point because I feel like I'm over communicating sometimes, but really trying to be transparent. And you've seen quite a robust use of our principals in all of our schools, as well as myself getting information out through Bright Arrow from Power School. You've seen a lot of survey data. As I mentioned, I am sending out tomorrow, I'll be sending out to staff what their survey data looked like. And some of it will match up to what our students and parents shared with us. And we're going to be doing some more surveys with our students as well. And I'll continue to post that on the website as well. And I think that is the bulk of it. I know I went very fast because there's a lot of information in there, but certainly we're available for questions.
So I can't see everybody. Hold on.
Do you want me to stop sharing?
Just for a minute. Yes, please. Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Catherine?
Susan, I was just wondering if you could speak to whether and how issues of diversity have been talked about in implementing those, including them in this plan.
So we're still working on that, but as some of you know, I had started to partner with the Mass Partnership for Diversity in Education because I think one of the areas that we need to focus on, in addition to supporting our students, I think bringing some more diversity into the district and trying to hire some more people of color so that the district has some more representation for our students as role models. So that's one area that I started moving into and I started attending those meetings. And also I'm going to have Dr. Botello attend. We'll be trading off on some of those meetings and see what we can do to increase diversity as we start to hire for the next season. However, second to that, we started some work with Keisha, and I'm sorry, Peter, can you correct me on
Keisha
her?
Lamb out of Alphabet Valley Collaborative. Yeah, there is a section in there, Dr. Savard, that commits to some additional professional development around issues of equity and bias. And we did some of that work during those first 10 days. There's been some ongoing work at the building level going on, and we're trying to figure out what that looks like going forward. In addition, a commitment to creating that equity and anti-bias team that we've discussed. And we're working with, we're trying to figure out what that's going to look like. We've been working with, again, Keisha from Alphabet Collaborative to see if we might partner with her to really guide that work, because she has some proposals that really dig deep into not only understanding issues of bias and equity, but also applying it in a deep way through kind of like ongoing equity audit processes at the school and district level. So we're going to be beginning that work as well.
Yeah, so we
there's
certainly
a small section in there
under the PD piece. Yeah. So we definitely have not the final plan in place, but we certainly want to make sure that that is not ignored, because that is certainly a pressing issue, certainly in the culture and climate in today's students and in our staff. We need to address these areas and support our staff and students with this. We also have talked with Lisa Koshin with Diverse Holliston. We're going to be working a little bit with them to see if we can partner to do some of this work. So we've had a couple of proposals that have been shared with us, and we're going to be vetting those a little bit more in the hope that we can start some of that work, hopefully sometime in January or going into the spring, but then it wouldn't be just a one and done. We're looking for something to be a multi-year platform, potentially at least into next year, and then hopefully, ideally, at least another year after that to do some of that work and have it ongoing and meaningful.
Yeah, and I would say another piece of that work, Dr. Savard, is looking at, how kids are faring in remote and hybrid learning or in person at the elementary, and seeing if that is, impacting some individuals in some groups differently than others, and how can we bridge that gap when some are struggling more. And that's, partly issues of equity, based upon various identity, areas, but also just in general.
And does any of these, and without getting too specific, but is there talk about changing or integrating this into the curriculum at all? I hear you talking about awareness and bias and PDs, but what about, the easiest way to do it is obviously through English classes and choices of literature and things like that. But, and integrating these things into science is a little bit more difficult, for example. Have you covered that at all, or has that been talked about?
Yeah, we have some of that work beginning, in at the different subjects in different in different schools, but then we're also looking to kind of build capacity to do that in, even more effective ways. And so part of it is kind of building, kind of our general understanding across the staff, but also a leadership group that can really, that's a cross-sectional group of teachers, administrators, parents that can kind of lead that work kind of going forward. But yes, there is some curriculum changes going on that started last summer with a bunch of the summer projects, and then there's been some ongoing work with that throughout the year. Though I know that people are passionate about it, and I also know that it's probably not gone as quickly as they would have liked if we were in a typical year.
Great, thank you.
Dawn?
I did just want to follow up. I know, Dr. Savard, you said it's more difficult in the sciences. I just wanted to put out there that in our high school chemistry classes, we do read as part of the curriculum, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, a book by Rebecca Skloot. And I have seen, in the freshman English class, they have incorporated and they've been reaching and getting more diverse books, at least with last year's class. I know some of the work is well underway, but the Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks from sophomore chemistry has inspired me to read, and somehow they have worked it in even to the science classes. So thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Dawn.
Any other questions about? In the section about the PD for the paras, that's referring to PD for new hires, correct? Because I thought most of our veteran paras have already gone through most of the modules, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, Kelly told us the other day it is for the new paras. However, because of the transfer over to remote last spring, some of the paras did not get through all the modules, so they will be able to access them as well if they didn't complete, and they can pick up where they left off.
Yeah, and teachers and counselors and SSAs, and other professionals throughout the system have created new modules that exist. So they might be similar in topics, perhaps, in some cases, though not in all, to some of the old modules. These are things that are both relevant to new paras as well as experienced ones.
We don't need to vote on this tonight, correct?
No,
we didn't set the expectation. Yeah.
No, and then I don't know how you've done it before, if you've done it similar to the handbook and you have another reading, or.
I don't know. This year is so different. This year is so different.
No, we can plan on
we're doing this
back.
like 3 months later, so.
I think we have to approve the goals just from the district wide, because that's how we do evaluations at the end of the year, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think the piece that we're going to be bringing in the principals to tie. Yes. They do need to tie it to their school improvement plan. So a delay on the vote.
So we can do it all together when we do theirs. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, the only thing is they would have to have an approved plan in order to write their goals around it. Yeah.
Moved by Cynthia.
Second by Dawn.
Moved by Cynthia, seconded by Dawn. You totally threw me off. Wait a minute.
Sorry.
Motion to approve.
Yeah, so there's a motion to approve the updated district-wide goals as presented this evening. Moved by Cynthia, seconded by Dawn. Roll call vote. Mrs. Listevnik.
Yes.
Ms. Naborski.
Yes.
Dr. Savard.
Yes.
Mr. Morton.
Yes.
Ms. Koshin.
Yes.
Mrs. Raffi, yes. Thank you. Strategic plan.
Yes, I just wanted to talk and touch on this briefly, because I know that I've mentioned it before very briefly as well, that as I mentioned earlier tonight, certainly the pandemic has led to huge paradigm shifts in how we're looking at education, things that, although it's been a negative thing that pushed us out of our comfort level, there are some good things and good outcomes that are coming from COVID as well, because it's forcing us to use technology in a different manner and opening up our thinking and how we're transitioning, and in some ways forcing people out of their comfort zone to try new things that they may not have tried if they didn't have this opportunity, negative or positive. It's forcing us to do things in a different way. So in that respect, I really feel like this might be a time, though, although that you have a strategic plan in place for one more year, the shifts that are happening right now might be something we want to capitalize on, and you may want to think about starting a strategic plan sooner that would even start sooner, that could even start for the next fall school year and be modified from the current plan, even though you have that one more year in place. I think the things that are happening right now are really things that are going to be long-term and have a long-term impact, and I think this might be a really good time to both seize the opportunity to look into how technology has been changed and shifted in a positive way, but also the social emotional needs that students are going to have and staff are going to have, because I do think we're going to see an impact for a long time. The after effects of how COVID has impacted us should be something that we embed in the work we do moving forward as well. So I just thought I'd put that out there, because if we were going to start a strategic plan, you'd probably want to do that sooner than later, sometime maybe beginning in late spring into early summer, if we were going to try to have that start for the new school year as well.
Andy, you were on the strategic plan the last time around. I'm totally putting you on the spot. I apologize. Just any initial thoughts where you actually were really in the process?
It took a whole lot longer than we expected it to take, is the immediate reaction I had. Depending, and the other piece is, depending on how we're going to be able to meet, it may be more or less complicated. We met up we met in the library. We sat around a big table. It was a very collaborative conversation. And if we're doing that in Zoom, I could see that being a significant challenge we worked on shared documents, but everybody had their device with them and we were able to communicate at the same time and all look at things at the same time and see everybody and have those conversations. So if we're going to start it and we're going to be in a remote type of meeting situation, I just anticipate it taking probably much longer than we anticipate it would in a kind of in-person setting. And then the other piece of it is just finding the right community members to represent all of the different constituencies and needs of the kids in the community and things like that. Is if you want those folks, you want to get them on board sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and when I've done some strategic planning in the past, a lot of the strategic planning I did was at the Collaborative. North River Collaborative used to bring in many, because we had 7 different districts that came together. We had representation from all 7 districts, but we literally met for 3 days in the summer, and it was 3 full days. And we did get it all done in that time, but we brought in an outside facilitator. And I do feel confident that I could help facilitate, but sometimes I think it's better to bring someone from the outside in, because then we're all doing the work together with somebody else leading it. So I would prefer to have someone that we really valued come in and kind of facilitate the process so that I could help be part of that process with all of you.
Yeah. The other thought I had just as you were talking about that is one of the things that held us up was not the actual creating and writing of it, but we wanted to survey the community and get some information. And the process of doing that and of writing a survey to find out what we wanted to incorporate into our strategic plan took a significant amount of time. So I can imagine that would streamline. And if we had a small group ahead of time that gathered some data from the community, and then we could hit the ground running. We could do it in a shorter amount of time. 3 days feels ambitious, but and intense, but certainly it could be done.
No, that's good feedback. So I would recommend, I'd like everyone to really take some time to think about this, and I'm going to make this an agenda item for our December meeting. Just sort of brainstorm, people you think, not particular people per se, but different groups of people that you think should be involved, questions that you want to ask. But I agree. I think that, sometimes we forget that even in the darkest times, there's light, and there's definitely some things in education that can change for the better. So I'm excited, and I would encourage us to consider starting sooner than later. So think about that. But Andy, I'll definitely be, leaning on you for your feedback where you were in the process, for sure. And, think about it. So thank you for that.
I just had a question for Annie. Do Do you know where the original survey ended up? Because that could be something that would be able to be modified and copied potentially.
Does Anne Louise have that?
I want to say Anne Louise has it. I think it was Joan and it was Anne Louise and I was there, and I think Anne Louise had access to the survey. So I think she may have it somewhere.
Okay, thank you. And I just say carpe diem. Sometimes out like Stacy says, out of darkness can come some light.
And I do want to, I didn't actually say thank you, but I appreciate the administrative team for updating the district goals. I'm sorry, my head is like in the clouds tonight. You are putting out fires every single day, and then you took that on top of it. So it does not go unnoticed, and I appreciate that. And I thank you for that. So thank you to all of you for putting that together. Keith and Susan, do you have any information on update on HPS's SOI for the high school?
I do not. Can't apparently click on mute either. No, I do not. I think that obviously you guys would have to decide whether or not you wanted us to go forward, and any updates we'd have to put into it. We can do. I'm not sure how much really has to change. It's not like the buildings have moved or we've added classrooms. But I mean, obviously giving it a fresh set of eyes and dotting an I differently or something can help. But I think maybe a discussion of the school committee because again, you have to go forward to the board, the select board, to get them to agree to submit it. So.
Yeah.
But have you heard from? Sorry, have you heard from Mashville?
We haven't heard no yet.
Yeah. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, so we do need to follow up.
I don't think we've heard anything from them.
You're right. We have not heard no. I just assumed it was no because.
Well, I was curious. Have you heard anything at all? Like at least last year we had the school committee conference, and Jack McCarthy was there and gave an update, like where they were financially. And so with COVID, did they put it on hold? Like I haven't even had a chance to look it up.
Last year.
Yeah, no, I've heard nothing. This is something we probably should follow up with because it's been crickets right now, and maybe it is because people are so focused on other things, and certainly it wasn't on our radar to be thinking about it as well. Except
they also might have pulled funding.
All right. Well, can I please throw one more thing on your plate and have you see if you can get any information for us for December?
I'm looking at their website right now, so.
Okay.
But yeah.
Thank you.
and we'll follow up on that.
And so we're also a little delayed in looking at the school year calendar for FY 21-22. So did everyone take a peek?
I'll pop it up, but Dr. Patello had worked on that, thinking of the, let's see, I know I have all that. Can you see that a little bit at least? He started working on the professional development days. So, Dr. Patello, do you want to speak to the days that you put in there for now as a proposal?
Yeah, so the traditional day would be the 3rd. Another potential option is the 31st of August. Honestly, the 31st would be probably more of a combination of a PD day and that kind of transition day concept that we've discussed. So I just think realistically, if that's the day, it would be a combination of the two, but it would certainly be a part of pure PD. If not the 3rd, it would be the day we typically do. A day in October that connects to Indigenous Peoples Day, Columbus Day. It would be great to have a day in November, but I left that out because of the various days off. And we don't have an election day this year. A day in December in the middle, the January 14th before Martin Luther King's Day, and then a day in February and in March. In March, I had kind of an option for another Wednesday, which is I think a little bit more productive, but the Fridays the Friday could work as well. So that kind of gives us, some kind of rhythm of days, almost, one day a month through to March. So that was kind of the initial draft of the PD day.
And November 4th would be a new holiday
for
as well.
Diwali.
Yeah.
Can I just make a plea that could we start our school year earlier? We started so late this year, and I know I talked about this last year, but I know that it's typical that we start the week before Labor Day weekend, but it's so late, and I don't know what situation we're going to be like next year, but I would like us to consider whether or not we could start the week before, even if it was a couple of days before. I feel like it will really help us on the back end with June. If you look at our end date, we've got June 21st. That's incredibly late in the year.
What's the contractual impact, Keith? You know the contractual better than I.
There shouldn't be any. It's just
I just want to make sure that I.
Nope, there is.
Think so.
Yeah, there's no start date in the contract.
Yeah, we don't have a requirement to start after Labor Day or any of that stuff. This past year has already been delayed so much. I just wonder whether there is any appetite for discussing whether we could start, even if it was a few days into the earlier week or not.
If we did that, we might want to consider kind of the Monday as an opening day. What would that be? The 23rd, Tuesday as a kind of that transition day, because that's something teachers, and then still have that Friday. So getting a couple days that week.
So just, we're still phasing it in, but like at least getting a few more days earlier in than, I don't know if that's possible.
So first of all, Peter, my apologies, because there was a PD update that was on the agenda that I jumped down to the strategic plan. My apologies. I checked it off instead of the district goals. So
sorry. Apologies. Yeah, we have that ready for you too.
I'm sorry. But can we, I'm not, did we actually agree to this transition day? Because I'm not sure.
No, that's
okay.
No, it's not that.
That's it has, right now on that has the 31st or the 3rd. The 3rd is the traditional day. Again, the 31st would be another day to consider based upon the conversations we had previously.
It's like just moving that back a week, Stacy, from what we're looking at, and still having a Friday off. Does that make sense?
So I think it's also would depend on what the last day of school would be, which we won't know, but with the hope that, as we talked about earlier, about if we're able to go into remote on snow days, I guess we didn't talk about it here. We talked about it one time before.
We did, but yeah.
If you have enough electricity in town, we don't lose electricity, but we can't get to school, then we may have the opportunity to not have to use snow days, which we've only used one inclement weather day so far. So that is potentially gets us to an earlier end of the school year. But the later we go, as you know, could impact the length of the summer and preparing for the new school year as well.
Yes, exactly. Anybody? Thank you for your work to put this in, but
Cynthia, I like that suggestion of starting just a little bit earlier. It's something to consider. Or we're not ready to vote on it tonight, are we?
I don't know if we have to vote on it. Just this is our first pass, right, Stace?
Right, first pass.
I would just be interested to see what that looks like if we could do that, where that puts us. I'm sorry, I know it's more work.
No, we'll, and I think probably a good thing to get some input from the principals as well, to see if there's any other things that we haven't thought of, and then we can come back with something else.
Catherine?
Susan, I was just wondering, with the crazy landscape that we're in this year, with the ability to do remote learning, does that impact snow days? Do we still have snow days, or we just say open your Chromebooks and do your work?
We definitely have more flexibility because the teachers have been told that they should be prepared at any time because we just never know what could happen at the state level. So they do know that they should be prepared to be able to jump into a remote platform. It could happen very quickly. The issue we have, as you saw when we had the unforeseen electrical storm and the power outages,
right?
And we couldn't do it that day because at that point I was hearing that approximately 25% of the town was out. So we had an equity issue. Also, not knowing how many teachers were impacted, because it could technically be more than 25% if the teachers were in other towns as well. And that's why we opted not to do remote that day. We would have loved to be able to get kids to school, but the roads were blocked. So in normal circumstances, when it's just a heavy snowfall, we can't get the roads cleared or the buildings cleared, but we have electricity, then absolutely that would be the preferred mode, is to go into remote. And the teachers are aware that that could be a possibility. So I'm hopeful that that is what we'll be able to do, barring any other of the electrical issues that we had in that past storm.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, because this is obviously the first year we've ever had the infrastructure in place to do that. So that's good to know. Thank you.
It could be, yes.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what the department says. You know, I feel like my expectations were so high after meeting Commissioner Riley, and then seeing some decisions lately. I don't know. I feel like he could turn around and say, nope, you'll have to have snow days. I just think it'll be interesting to see.
He did already address it, and he did say that we should be able to have that flexibility. So he's been pretty reasonable about that, and has pretty much stated in other meetings that given that we have the ability to be remote, that would not be something that they would force us to use.
Good. We'll see. All right. Peter, sorry, let's jump back into PD.
Okay, great. Yeah. We had a really productive professional development day on the 3rd. We tried to be really as responsive as possible to our staff in this really unique year, while still moving forward in new learning and improving curriculum. And so the elementary schools spent half the day with Cynthia Merrill, really working on next phases of the literacy workshop. At Miller, they focused on response to reading in writing through a digital lens, conferring for independent reading, elements of conferring, and data collection and documenting growth. One of the great things about our workshop model and the Fountas and Pinnell materials that support it is that it's really about observing kids as readers and writers, and figuring out what skills they need to build upon, whether it's the whole group or a small group or individuals. And we do a lot of that through, conferring with kids individually and in small groups. And so that's really flexing that muscle, and doing that with, at the upper grades in the hybrid environment, both, remotely and in person. Placentina had a similar focus around conferring and using data to inform instructional goals and groups. And so they were working on that as well. In addition, the second half of the day really focused on going deeper with some of the technology that teachers are using in the classroom. So they had the opportunity to choose from a variety of different workshops, as well as to both collaborate together, but also work with Woody Carey and Ali Curley to get support in taking the next steps in improving their instruction in a remote or hybrid environment. We then had we had some other kind of groups that are not heavily involved with the literacy aspect who dug into concepts of French immersion, was looking at mathematical concepts, as well as the balance of language and teaching content. The UA teachers were applying some of the technology workshops to the lessons that they're creating for asynchronous instruction at the elementary level. At the middle school, they began by really unpacking the surveys of parents and students and staff related to hybrid and remote, and trying to identify areas in need of growth. They also had some choices around workshops. Some were around anti-bias and anti-racism, social, emotional, and behavioral issues, the science of learning, and then really digging deeper into remote and hybrid teaching. Then they met in collaborative groups in order to tackle some of the challenges that were identified during the surveys, as well as look at ways that they could improve their curriculum or particular lessons in this hybrid and remote landscape. The high school started off together, and then teachers in interdisciplinary groups proposed a variety of different focus areas, and they kind of dug into those. At the same time, they also had opportunities to sign up for workshops or to get some support either from teacher leaders or from Tom Reeve or Lois in order to kind of continue to work out some of the kinks and continue to improve in their remote and hybrid instruction using technology. And finally, there were a couple other groups that were more district-wide groups, including our speech and language pathologists and our OT folks who were really looking at how they use teletherapy and teleassessments. So they were looking deeply at how do we assess in a remote environment, and we had a number of other groups working on particular issues. So it was a very good day. All of the buildings did a similar survey that's been developed in conjunction with the PD Council, and the PD Council is meeting again next week in order to analyze that survey together in order to inform December and January PD.
Questions from the committee? No. Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay, Lisa did not send a
I don't think we have a
newsletter.
newsletter, no. Do we?
Lisa, you didn't know newsletter, correct?
No newsletter.
Okay. that's what I
Okay.
thought.
All right, great. All right. So our next meeting is scheduled for December 10th. I don't foresee a need to meet next week unless something urgent came up, but I don't want to take away time from the administrators. I know that they're working overtime here, so I don't have any need for a meeting next week unless someone has something that they would like to say. All right, so for December, we will, oh, sorry, Keith.
Warrants.
Oh, I'll give you the floor in 1 minute. Dawn?
This, so if today is November 12th, while I agree we don't need one on November 19th, and we probably don't want to spend Thanksgiving with each other, we probably will want to meet before the December town meeting. And then there was an issue that we're not certain about what's going on with winter sports. And if we are in the red again, we might have to vote on that. So I would anticipate that we would need a meeting before December 10th, but maybe not next week or maybe not Thanksgiving. So are we just going to kind of schedule it as something comes up, or would that put us at maybe December 3rd?
Are you looking to shift the meeting of the 10th to the 3rd, or are you talking about an addition? Just clarifying.
Yeah, no, I guess just looking to shift the meeting scheduled for the 10th to the 3rd, unless you don't anticipate, would we need that for winter sports?
Yeah, we're still waiting to hear back from MIAA. I know there's some meetings scheduled for next week, and I know the Nicole Bottomley will be at some of those meetings. I think one is on Monday with MIAA. So I suspect that they're going to be delaying until they give us more information. We won't be able to know the decision. So I'm not sure. Initially, it was supposed to be by, I think, November 30th, but I'm not positive that we'll have the information given how close we're getting to Thanksgiving already, and I think it might be delayed. So December 3rd, we may have information, we may not. It's just so hard to say because things have been shifted forward unbeknownst to us.
So I would just say, I think as a committee, we should hold that date open should we need a discussion about sports, but I don't necessarily want to change the district goals piece and the the calendar. Like I don't want people to lose a week on those topics. So I'd rather keep the 10th and then do the 3rd for sports if we need like an emergency meeting, if you will.
Mm.
Okay.
Okay.
Does that work for everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. Keith, do you want to share the warrants that have been signed?
Yes, the school committee chair signed this following warrants: a school bill warrant in the amount of $248,565.66, of which nothing is COVID. And she signed another school committee warrant in the amount of $132,883.95, of which $3,626.80 was COVID related. And I have a cafeteria bill warrant she signed in the amount of $16,528.80.
All right, with that being said, it is 9:31. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved by Dawn.
Seconded by Andy.
By Dawn, seconded by Andy. All in favor, roll call vote. Mrs. Listevnik,
Yes.
Dr. Savard,
Yes.
Ms. Naborski,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Ms. Koshin,
Yes.
Mrs. Raffi. It is 9:31. I wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving. Please be safe, follow the guidelines, wash your hands, physical distance, use
Wear your
hand
mask.
sanitizer, and be kind to one another. Happy Thanksgiving, all. Great to see you guys.
And happy Diwali
Night.
this weekend, everyone.